What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Who Gives a Dram. Today is Monday, January 26th. Yes, January 26th. I'm recording this. It is just about 11 a.m. on Friday, January 23rd. So this is technically before the monster winter storm Benjamin that we're supposed to be having later this weekend. And I know a lot of my listeners are residing and living in most of the states that are planned to be affected. So although this episode will release once the bulk of that storm has come to pass, I'm recording this beforehand. And I hope and pray that everybody is okay, is safe, not majorly affected, but obviously be safe out there. Hopefully you got plenty of whiskey. I know that I do. But for real, I hope everybody is safe. Well, I'm going to be bunkered in probably here in Rhode Island. I'll probably be at my parents' house in Connecticut, right across the border in Stonington. Yeah, I'll probably be there. So since my dad's surgery, I don't want him to shovel snow. So I'll be there shoveling, plowing, bringing in wood, stuff like that, just helping him out. So that's going to be my plans this weekend, and it kind of works out perfectly since the NFL conference championship games are on Sunday. So not too bad. And if you're watching this on YouTube, yes, I know I still have my Christmas tree up. I was in Kentucky last week or 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording, and when I got back, I just didn't feel like taking it down yet. So that being said, I will be taking it down soon. I usually keep it up until the middle of January, but it's such a great light for when it's dark in my living room at night, but also a great light for the podcast. So I don't know. I definitely don't want to keep it up for too long, but at the same time, I do enjoy having it up quite a bit. So don't make fun of me, please. I can't take it. We have a lot to talk about. It's been a bit since I've recorded a podcast. I have time on my calendar today. I put time on my calendar to record because I usually don't record this early in the morning. It's usually kind of after the workday. And if I get emails throughout this recording, I apologize. Like I just got one right now from my compliance team, but it's going to have to wait at least 30 minutes. So, I was going to start recording about a half hour ago, but I got caught up with some paperwork. The worst part about this business is the paperwork and the compliance and there's so many regulatory hurdles you have to jump over and hoops you have to jump through, and it falls on me to make sure that those are all being taken care of on our end. So I've grown a lot more organized in the past few years since I've been doing this, but today we're going to talk about non-distilling producers and what they are, what that means, and how that relates to the overall bourbon industry in 2026. Obviously, with McTavish Spirits being my company, I am very well versed into what exactly a non-distilling producer does. Also, in many parts of the world, simply known as an independent bottler, there really is no major difference between the two terms, but I do want to get into exactly what it is for those that don't know and why McTavish Spirits chose to go that route and why many other brands go that route, including the brand that we will be reviewing here today on the podcast. One of my favorite non-distilling producers, and I did, in fact, visit their bar when I was in Louisville. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw it, but we will be reviewing Pursuit Spirits today. More specifically, their Pursuit United line triple mash bourbon at 108 proof. If you're watching on video, you can see I've already cracked into this bottle, but I do want to give it some true and as well versed as I can tasting notes. I know I like it, but I do want to talk about it and talk about some of the things Pursuit is doing over in their corner of the world. Um, but if I didn't already say it, because I don't remember, Happy New Year. I had a great Christmas season, wonderful Christmas time with my family. New Year's Eve was very low key for me. I sat at home with my mom and dad, drank a lot of wine, had a great dinner, smoked a cigar, and watched the Stranger Things finale, and it was awesome. Stayed there until the ball dropped, gave my parents a hug, Happy New Year, got home, went right to bed. It was great. As a 29-year-old man now, it is getting to bed early and earlier is so much more of a thing that I prioritize. Even if I'm just laying in bed, I just like to be there. So I had a few weekends ago. I had one of my friends who was in the downtown area I live in, and she was like, "Why don't you meet me out at a bar?" And it was like 11:30 at night, and I was like, "Absolutely not, absolutely not. I've been in bed for 2.5 hours. Yes, it's Friday night, but whatever." 29 years old, turning 30 this year. Turning 30 years old this year. When I started Who Gives a Dram, I was 23. Crazy. I do want to do more podcasts this year. Don't get me wrong. I know I say it all the time, but I really do want to do more podcasts this year. I want to get into more of a detailed view behind the scenes of McTavish Spirits. I tried to do it kind of second half of last year with some Making McTavish vlog style videos, as well as some more podcasts. But I do want to make a conceited effort, or a concentrated effort, to do more this year. And I want to continue to review bottles that I know I love. And doing this podcast gives me a reason to ramble, and I just post it for you guys. But there was, before we get into the non-distilling producer thing, there was a very important list that came out just a few days ago at the time of this recording, and that was Fred Minnick's Top 100 American Whiskey Rankings. And I love seeing this list every single year because I have a lot of respect for Fred Minnick and what he does in his palate and the brand that he's built for himself. And this is obviously a very big deal to not just large producers, but those smaller craft non-distilling producers, as well as craft distilleries. This is a big deal. The War Chief placed number 18 in 2023 when we first launched McTavish Spirits, and that was a huge selling point to us. It still is. I still, in all of our marketing materials, say that we were voted the number one bottled and bond bourbon of 2023, according to Fred Minnick. And that is something that is, it's very, depending on who you ask, that's not true, because other awards competitions could award another bottled and bond higher than us, but marketing is marketing. I try to, obviously you don't want to lie. That's the biggest thing. Kind of takes away from the McTavish Spirits being authentic angle entirely. So we don't lie, but it was true according to Fred in 2023 in a blind tasting. But regardless, and 2023 happened to be the only year Fred never posted a graphic, which I really wish we could have used as some marketing material in 2023. But nonetheless, this year he released his list, and I didn't watch it or anything, but I was very, very interested in the list and where people were ending up. Obviously, the top 25 is always interesting to see. I did see that Brothers Bond, Bottled and Bond 7-year, landed at 23, so right around where we landed a few years ago. The number one whiskey on Fred Minnick's list was, of course, a BTAC, George T. Stagg, which was Hazmat this year, 142.8 proof. I have not tried it, so I can't say for certain. But number two was also a BTAC, Sazerac 18-year at 90 proof. Rounding out the top 10, number 3 was Bomberger's PFG at 100.2 proof. Number 4 was Brother Justice, Founders Reserve American Single Malt, which is, again, one of those very small brands that now will see an influx of at least interest. I'm sure it'll translate over to sales, but at least interest in the brand. I have seen that brand briefly on Instagram, but never had it. Never did a lot of research into it. But now, obviously, I will be looking into it. So, number 5 is the Heaven Hill 90th Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey at 107 proof. Number 6, Bardstown Bourbon Company Double Barrel Discovery Series number 13 at 110.8 proof. Number 7 was the Maker's Mark Keepers release. Shout out to those whiskeys called the Keeper. Maker's Mark, McTavish Spirits, Make It McTavish. See where I'm going? Number 8 was Booker's 2025 Batch 3 Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey at 125 proof. Number 9, Bourbon Deluxe 8-year Batch 2, 119 proof. And to round out the top 10, I love to see this guy in here. Dark Arts Armagnac Finish 16-year 125.2 proof. I'm a big fan of Dark Arts. I love the bottle design. I love the sorcerer and wizardry aspect. Actually, you can't see it right now, but on my TV, I am just finishing up the Lord of the Rings Return of the King Extended Edition. The past 3 days, I've been watching Lord of the Rings, and my TikTok has been filled with Lord of the Rings lore and kind of stuff that's more from the novels of like who are the most powerful people, what is Gandalf, and all these things. Why does he turn from gray to white? And it's been taking over my TikTok feed, so I decided to watch all 3 movies, and then I'll probably watch the 3 Hobbits after this. Shout out to Graham. But this was a very interesting list this year. A lot of typical players here, obviously, as they are well deserved. I did see at number 100 was Sir Davis American Whiskey 88 proof, which is Beyonce's whiskey, and it's always good to see a fellow celebrity backed brand on there. Obviously, I mentioned Brothers Bond down below. I see three chord right here, Strange collab 99 proof. I'm a big 3-chord guy. We just did them on the podcast a few episodes ago. Forbidden Batch 3, Marianne Eaves. She's a very prolific figure in this industry. Brothers Bond regenerative bourbon is making a place on here. Lots of, you got Sealbox on here, which you can find the Legacy series on. Father Time Bourbon is here. Another Dark Arts. Pursuit Triple Mash Rye coming in at number 47. I had that at the tasting room a few weeks ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I can see why it's on there. There's a lot of really solid offerings here, and I do want to get this new book by Fred, Bottom Shelf, How a Forgotten Brand of Bourbon Saved One Man's Life. I do want to get it, not only to support Fred, but I'm interested in reading it. But this Fred Minnick list every year is such a big deal. I always look forward to it, and like I said, the War Chief placed number 18. I think Legacy Series 1 barely missed the top 100. If we go to, maybe I can see it here, Fred Minnick top 100 2024. I want to say we just missed it. Yeah, I know there was something I read that said the Legacy series was just outside the top 100, which, again, it's really just to even be mentioned in those lists is an honor, in any capacity. So, but anyways, I wanted to quickly touch on that because I respect Fred a lot, and I think that what he does with that top 100 is an absolutely legitimate and worthy list to base your next bottle purchase off of. So shout out to Fred, friend of the brand. We actually had Graham on his YouTube show back in early 2024 maybe. But anyways, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. And while I talk about an NDP, I will pour some of this bourbon whiskey in my Glencairn. Again, this is Triple Mash Bourbon by Pursuit United, a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, low rye, and wheated bourbons. 108 proof, 3 mash bills in here. This premium 4-grain expression showcases the art of combining rye and wheated bourbons with an amplified profile. By elevating the proof, we've intensified the whiskey's intrinsic flavors, unlocking a remarkable depth of complexity that spans the entire whiskey flavor spectrum. And the 3 distilleries that Kenny and Ryan are using to blend this triple mash bourbon, which I believe is one of their core portfolio offerings, is I'm assuming a 1/3 blend of each of Bardstown Bourbon Company, 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. Tennessee Distilling Partners, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. And Finger Lakes Distilling out in New York, 70% corn, 20% wheat, 10% malted barley. So very low rye in this triple mash. You do have some wheat in there as well. And I think that's a very unique thing that they do. I have been saying from the beginning how much I love Pursuit Spirits, Pursuit United, the Bourbon Pursuit podcasts. I mean, they advertise they are the number one bourbon podcast in the world, and there's really no arguing there. They are massive, and I'm a big fan. Once again, I've already had some of this, so I already know that I like it, but I do want to dive into it a bit more as we talk about non-distilling producers. Just a little bit. It is 11:30, so I haven't eaten yet. All right, let's put the bottle right center there. So, what is a non-distilling producer? And I'm not just rambling about what my thoughts on it are. I did just kind of Google non-distilling producers on Google, and I found 2 articles. Brindiamo, I think that's how you pronounce it, has an entire article, What is an NDP, non-distiller producer? What is an NDP? So, without reading word for word what it says on this article to start, an NDP, a non-distiller producer, I say non-distilling producer, is essentially a whiskey brand that purchases either new make or finished product from another distillery, and essentially is doing everything else. Whether they're aging it themselves, but they're at least blending, bottling, obviously marketing, distributing, things like that. So more or less, it's a brand that is not technically distilling their own whiskey. There are many examples of very successful non-distilling producers on the market today, and a lot of the biggest brands on the market started as non-distilling producers. The first one that always comes to mind for me, well, there's 2. Well, now there's actually 3. But Bulleit is the first one that always comes to mind. And they started, Bulleit Bourbon and Bulleit Rye started sourcing from MGP. They have since moved to using some of their own in-house distillate for their bourbon, but I believe they still source for their rye. It's MGP Rye. And then there's High West Distillery, one of my favorite distilleries on the market. They started as a non-distilling producer, and of course, the big one now, that third one that I added on to there, is Penelope Bourbon Company that just got absorbed by MGP. So I don't think technically they're considered a non-distilling producer anymore because it is technically an arm of the MGP, family of brands. But they started off as a non-distilling producer. They do it the right way. Smoke Wagon is another big one that is contracted with MGP, non-distilling producer. Blue Run, who we talked about on the podcast a bit ago, who was acquired by Coors, they were a non-distilling producer. McTavish Spirits, the brand that I co-founded with Graham McTavish, non-distilling producer. Brothers Bond, founded by Ian and Paul from the Vampire Diaries, non-distilling producer. Pursuit Spirits, non-distilling producer. There are so many wonderful brands on the market that are not distilling their own whiskey. And from what I can tell, back in the day, kind of before my time in bourbon, really, but people kind of snuffed their nose at, people not making their own whiskey. And some people still do. Some people just still like to buy from those that are producing their own. But the majority, it's either going to be Sazerac, Heaven Hill, Brown-Forman. I mean, they're still massively owned enterprises that are producing this whiskey. But then that's where the beauty of craft distilleries come in. Starlight is the first one that comes to mind for me. Just beautifully crafting their own whiskey. Ben Holiday is a big one that are producing there's several good ones here in my great state of Rhode Island. Sons of Liberty and South County Distillers, which is right down the road from me. They also are creating their own. They're sourcing, but they're also laying down their own distillate, which I think is very cool. But what is the advantage of starting an NDP versus starting your own distillery? And I think the first very obvious answer to that question is cost. I don't know everybody's finances, but I would be willing to bet that 99% of people out there do not have the funds to self-fund opening up an entire distillery. I know we didn't, which is why we are sourcing right now. Going through the bank is an option, obviously, with opening up tasting rooms or opening up an entire distillery. But, you are really cutting down on a lot of your overhead costs by going the route of sourcing whiskey. You're cutting down on any type of brick and mortar costs. So whether that's rent or a lease, any type of taxes that come along with that, staffing, wages, material, things of that nature, that's all falls on to the company. Whereas as a non-distilling producer, I'll speak for McTavish because I'm not an expert as to the inside logistics of these other brands, but we partner with people, whether it's for co-packing, for bottling, for packaging, for labels. Like we partner with other companies that are helping us with that. Even with some of the more admin stuff, like our compliance team, we utilize American Spirits Exchange to help us with compliance, where we're distributed and making sure we're 100% compliant everywhere we are. As an NDP, we don't have a whole lot of overhead costs, which is very attractive to those that are looking to get into the space. And as long as you do it right, then it can be used as an incredibly competitive advantage over others. Now, there are brands that take NDPs and then move to brick and mortars. Pursuit Spirits is a wonderful example because they have a beautiful bar called Trial and Error right on Whiskey Row in downtown Louisville. And that is up to the company themselves, to the brand. If they want to take on, a brick and mortar location, then they will, finance that through private money or banks or whatever they do. Is that's just part of their business plan. But as we see here, according to this website, what is an NDP? An NDP, or a non-distiller producer, is a business that sells whiskey. It doesn't distill itself. Instead, NDPs acquire whiskey from established distilleries, often rebranding it or blending it to create distinct flavor profiles. While they don't own distilleries, they leverage extensive liquid sourcing networks to provide a variety of options for brands. This model is often confused with independent bottlers, but there is a key difference. NDPs focus on creating and branding their own product lines, while independent bottlers emphasize the original distillery that produced the whiskey. Now, that would be true, I think, several years ago, But I think today, in today's day and age, as I've talked about extensively on this podcast, one of the ways an NDP differentiates itself in the vast ocean of bourbon brands is by being transparent and by being authentic. I read you the 3 distilleries that Pursuit Spirits put into this bottle of triple mash bourbon. I read them to you. They're right on the label. McTavish Spirits says right at the bottom, distilled by Midwest Grain Products, distilled by Green River Distillery. Other brands, sometimes they choose to keep that close to their chest, whether they have to by contract or they just choose not to disclose that information. To each their own. But I think we're entering an age of ultra transparency in whiskey today. And I think that is what separates a lot of NDPs from others. Not to say there are bad ones. I believe whiskey is like pizza. There's different levels, but it's always whiskey. It's always good, at least speaking for bourbon or American whiskey in general. You can never have a bad pizza. At least in my experience. And in my experience, I've never had a bad American whiskey. Really, I've never had a bad whiskey in general. I might have had some pretty questionable Irish whiskeys back in the day, but in terms of American whiskey, it's all there's positives to be taken out of every single bottle that I've ever had in my entire life, which is why part of the reason why I love bourbon and rye whiskey. But yeah, I do think independent bottlers, I would consider McTavish also an independent bottler, just because we focus on amplifying the distilleries we are getting our whiskey from. And Pursuit is doing the same thing. I would put them in the same boat, as well as many, many, many others. I also found a very interesting article on Rabbit Hole Distillery, which I believe they also started as an NDP, and now they lay down their own distillate. But according to rabbitholedistillery.com, what is NDP bourbon? NDP is an abbreviation for Non-Distiller Producer. Bourbon that is NDP is purchased from a separate distillery and then bottled and marketed under its own name. This process is nothing new for the bourbon world, and you may have been drinking NDP bourbon all along without even realizing it. Many of these producers can craft a smooth and delicious bourbon simply by combining whiskey from different distilleries or adding their own blend of flavors. This has resulted in many surprisingly full-flavored and perfectly spiced blended bourbons. And I think that is another distinction with non-distilling producers where, at least in my case, and I obviously know this from Pursuit Spirits as well, and many, many others, it demands to highlight the blending capabilities of those that are producing the whiskey. I often get asked, what separates an NDP from the single barrel club that is right up the road, or this club that is going to, to pick a single barrel? And I think a lot of it comes down to having a wide variety of options available on the open market in terms of sourced barrels and sourced whiskeys, but also the blending components. Look at what Ryan and Kenny did with this barrel. They took 3 different mash bills from 3 distilleries and blended it. I don't know what the percentages are that they blended it to, but they did it. And what's in this bottle is going to be incredibly unique from when compared to other offerings. And that is one of the advantages of non-distilling producers. We can really highlight some of the blending craftsmanship. That's why I'm so proud of Legacy Series number 1, is because we took different, it's MGP, but we took different lots in different years and blended it until we got exactly what we thought was what we were looking for, finish it in that peated cask, and then there's a little bit of risk that comes to that. It's like, well, is this now going to ruin the underlying palate that we got from the bourbon beforehand? And thankfully it was fantastic. But that, it's, there are so many options when it comes to the non-distilling producer route. So blending is really something that an NDP, I think, should be highlighting. And even if they're picking just specific lots from, like we did with the War Chief, we get it from a specific lot of barrels that we found more or less at MGP. Same with the Keeper Batch 1, it was a very specific small lot of 95.5 rye that we kind of just fell into our laps from Green River Distillery. We decided to bottle it, put it under the McTavish name. As I've said for many, many years now, whiskey is although the authenticity is still there and it's still always going to be about the whiskey, there is such a higher demand for incredible marketing as well. I call this McTavish, we're 50% whiskey and 50% marketing. Now, that could be skewed. I personally believe the whiskey holds much more value, but at the end of the day, if you're looking to scale, you got to have that marketing. Pursuit does it well. Penelope did it better than anybody else. A little bit of the history of NDP bourbon here, then we'll get into the review. We're at 30 minutes. There is a deep history of crafting NDP whiskey that began in Scotland. In fact, 90% of the current Scotch whiskey market is NDP whiskey. The same process Scottish whiskey producers have used for decades remains a common practice today. Companies buy liquor from multiple distilleries and then blend them together to create their own exclusive Scotch whiskey brand. Sometimes these companies add in other grain liquors to the blend. NDP bourbon has a long-standing history of being produced using a similar method in the U.S. Kentucky bourbon distillers would sell their whiskey, also known as bulk market whiskey. They forgot a period there. Run-on sentence. Also known as bulk market whiskey to various grocers or bourbon producers, and then the producers would sell it to their customers. While some grocers would purchase whiskey from a bulk market, others would agree to a specific contract distilled whiskey they wanted for their final product, which is contract distillation. I believe Pursuit does it at least their New York partner. I could be wrong. They could be doing it with everybody, but that's what I think. This process involved the bourbon producer setting specific parameters for the desired whiskey, such as their mash recipe, amount of yeast, barrel char level, and alcohol proof. Once the whiskey was delivered to the producers, they would create their own bourbon whiskey using 3 different methods. The first, most common technique was simply combining 2 different brands of bourbon to create an exclusive blended bourbon. The second method was to add a neutral grain alcohol, such as vodka or gin, again crafting a completely unique product. With the third method, producers would enhance their flavor profiles of their NDP bourbon by adding flavorings like caramel, prune juice, juniper, different fruits, and a variety of herbs and spices. That is more back in the day. Yeah, they have a whole article here, 20th century NDP bourbon. A lot of NDPs back in the day, again, were adding these enhancers to their finished products that would mimic the look or the smell or even the taste of older aged bourbon, and that all falls under the over-encompassing Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, which McTavish Spirits holds near and dear to our heart, as the War Chief is a Bottled and Bond bourbon whiskey. And again, that was intentional from us to release because we wanted to really let people know that what we're releasing is authentically us. It's authentically McTavish. That's what we do. And 99.9% of the NDP brands on the market today do the same thing as well as Pursuit. So I want to get into the whiskey here. It's been sitting in the glass for 10 minutes now. I bought this when I was in Kentucky last week. I believe I paid $60, which is what their MSRP is on their websites. I bought it at Liquor Barn in Hamburg after I was done doing a McTavish Spirits tasting there. And the reason I bought it was because I don't believe Pursuit Spirits has distribution in Rhode Island, and I don't go out and kind of look for special bottles anymore. I have not been doing that really since I started McTavish Spirits, but I was perusing the very expansive bourbon whiskey wall at Liquor Barn in Lexington, and I decided to take this home with me. Spent my own personal money on it. And I pulled up their website here. I'm not going to look at the spec sheet just yet, but I just want to read what they say. And they say, Pursuit United, triple mash bourbon, 108 proof. If blending is art, here's the masterpiece. We harmoniously unite the best characteristics from multiple bourbons, regardless of mash bill, distillery, and location, to develop a one-of-a-kind flavor profile that breaks free from tradition and starts a new adventure. This 4-grain expression uses rye and wheated bourbons to create an uncommon whiskey. 108 proof, 54% alcohol by volume. And a little bit about Pursuit Spirits. Obviously, they started from the podcast Bourbon Pursuit, which is the #1 whiskey podcast in the world. Or I should say bourbon podcast. I don't know if it's the #1 whiskey podcast, but it's one of them. Bourbon Pursuit has been on for 10 years. And, basically they partner with different distilleries to whether they're contract distilling or open, just sourcing barrels on the open market like we do. That is, they wanted to take a different route, and they wanted to blend stuff together and utilize their palates that they've acquired over the past 10 years of podcasting at the highest level. And this, the nose here is just, oh man, it's very, I get like a first right off the bat is green apple candy forward with some floral notes. I do get some hint of barrel char on the nose as well. Here. Yeah, that's very fruity. I don't remember it being this fruit forward the first time I drank this. I get a bit of a creaminess on here as well, kind of like a it's a bit sweeter than like a bread pudding. I'd say like a creme brulee, because I get some of the like burnt caramelized brown sugar on the top, because it's definitely sweet. And I get some mint on there as well. This is more of like a peppermint. Again, kind of like this is very sweet on the nose. Like a peppermint candy, green apple, creme brulee, creamier. This would pair well with a cigar, I think. Like the cigars that I like are creamy, like, Macanudo, cafes or something. I'm actually, now that I said that, I think I'm going to have to go get one, because I do want to smoke a cigar during this snowstorm. Yeah, that nose is delicious. That's a fantastic nose on this bourbon. I'm sure, given more time, I could get more to it, but creamy fruit is kind of the main aspect here. So let's drink it. Cheers to another episode of Who Gives a Dram. For a low rye, I get a lot of that rye on the palate itself, which is strange. Again, the way I drink whiskey, first sip just goes down the gullet. I'm warming up the palate here. I'll wait a minute or two, take a sip of water, and then the next sip will coat my mouth more. But the first reaction here is a bit of a standard rye spice, and that is more of like a white pepper, smoother. Meaning, this is gonna sound stupid, but there are no wrong answers in whiskey. It's a less pointy rye, and I think that the way they blended this with the weeded bourbon from New York, from Finger Lakes Distilling. Yeah. I think the way they blended this, that weeded bourbon is kind of what's coming in and rounding things off, for lack of a better term. The fruit definitely stayed closer to the top of the palate. I did get more of like a brighter fruit. I almost got like a tiny little bit of a banana cream pudding type of thing. There is a bit more barrel char influence. I do get a little bit more cinnamon on the palate here. That is really rounded out nicely. Again, with this weeded bourbon, I think the inclusion of this weeded bourbon from New York is really what's separating this from the rest of the pack, for lack of a better term. Just an easy sipper, 108 proof. This is delicious. This is really good. Yeah, I would say it's kind of like a banana cream pudding with a little bit of cinnamon and barrel char on there. Maybe that creaminess definitely lends itself over. It's almost like an almond type of creaminess, kind of like if a banana cream pudding was made with like oat milk or almond milk or something. it definitely 1,000% does not drink its proof, because this is my first. I haven't even eaten breakfast, so this is my breakfast, liquid breakfast today. It is Friday, so whatever. Yeah, this is incredible. This is way better than the first time I had it, and the first time I had it, which was my last night in Lexington last week, was like, wow, this is great. But that was also after dinner. I had a burger at dinner, and Pursuit Spirits sought out the best whiskeys regardless of location and put an emphasis on developing products that compete against the most highly acclaimed and allocated bottles on the market. Pursuit Spirits partners with 4 distilleries across multiple states to create 6 specific mash bills with customized barrel char levels. Barrels age at their respective distillery to maintain terroir, then are hand-selected and shipped before being united. It definitely, I am such a big fan of this brand, and I haven't had much of their stuff. I had their barrel proof triple mash rye at their tasting room or at their bar, and now I'm having this, and I have it at home. And just with these two in general, the level of quality, but also transparency of what they're doing, and the level of commitment here is just it's on another level. I look at, and sometimes I feel like I gas up Pursuit Spirits a lot, but they really do deserve it. I look at Pursuit Spirits as one of the premier non-distilling producers on the market today, and I look at them for inspiration with a lot of stuff that we do with McTavish in terms of how they operate as a company and how they operate their marketing and their transparency, because that's what I really want to do. And I feel a deeper connection with the brand itself just because of the origins of Pursuit Spirits with the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Now, I would never say that the Who Gives a Dram podcast is nearly as big, nor was my other podcast I was on, Bourbon with Friends. Wasn't nearly as big, nor as organized or as good, to be completely honest, as the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. But if I didn't start Who Gives a Dram in 2020, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have these beautiful McTavish bottles behind me. I wouldn't be in the position I am, for better or for worse. Starting that podcast from that room right over there, my old studio, which is now Kale's room, really put me on the map in terms of my whiskey credentials or my brand. And McTavish Spirits would not have existed without me starting Who Gives a Dram. And I have a lot of passion for podcasting, although I don't do it anymore as much. And to see the guys take this 10-year-long podcasting journey, get to the #1 bourbon podcast in the world, start this brand that is just doing everything the right way, it gives me a lot of inspiration. And I hope one day to have them on this podcast or go on their podcast and just talk about the shared journey over some Pursuit Spirits and some McTavish Spirits, because I really think that this is a top-notch, highest of the high-level non-distilling produced bourbon whiskey. Just for shits and gigs, let's go to what their spec sheet says for their tasting notes. Pursuit United Bourbon, right here. Nose is nutty hazelnut and sweet honeycomb aromas are grounded by warm mulling spices and fresh toasted oak. So that's basically what I said. Taste, a well-mingling sweetness of brown sugar and honey transitions into malted chocolate and bright citrus tea. I do get a little of the tea. I don't get the chocolate, though. Honey, absolutely. I'm getting banana cream pudding, but that could be perceived as honey as well. Like, they're very similar, but I get more of the fruit aspect as opposed to just the sweetness of the honey. But honey is absolutely there. The finish is a warm and gradual progression of spicy orange marmalade, and I can see that. It's not a huge finish, but there is definitely an orange peel aspect, kind of like an old-fashioned in a way. Yeah, I mean, what these guys are doing is incredible. I'm a huge fan, and I've been wanting to review them on the podcast for a while. And that's where we're going to end it. We're 45 minutes in. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Who Gives a Dram. I actually don't even know what episode it is, but it'll be in the show notes. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'm Connor_whiskey. If you want to follow McTavish Spirits as well, just at McTavish Spirits. I wish I could talk about what we have coming up as to what my purpose was in Kentucky, although I can't talk about it yet. And eventually I will be able to, and I really do think that the releases that I've been blending and the releases that I've been working on are going to be incredibly received whiskeys. I'm really looking forward to it, but I can't say any more information on that. Hope you have a great week. If you don't have power yet from this winter storm, Benjamin, I hope it comes back soon. I hope I have power, talking to my future self. I'll see you back on this podcast. We'll see. Maybe next week. Maybe 3 months from now. I don't know. But I am going to make an effort to get on here at least a few times a month just to talk about my favorite brands and give you a behind-the-scenes look as to my thoughts on the whiskey world and what's happening with McTavish Spirits. But I hope you learned something about non-distilling producers today, and I hope that you go out and get a bottle of this bourbon in particular. I will link it in the description. If you want to buy a bottle, I don't know where they ship to, but there is a button that says add to cart, so they obviously ship to at least a handful of states. So until next time, we'll end it off with the famous Who Gives a Dram slogan. Always remember, whiskey's the water of life, so let's start living.